The call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had started like any other in my carefully orchestrated life. I was reviewing hotel security protocols in my office when my phone buzzed with the words that would change everything. "Sir, your wife just checked into our hotel. She's not alone." My name is Luke Harper, and for the past 8 years, I've lived what most people would call a comfortable suburban existence. What they don't know is that I'm not just another IT consultant running a small home automation business in Portland, Maine. I'm a former federal cyber task force operator who specialized in tracking financial crimes through hospitality networks. The Blue Heron Hotel downtown? I don't just own it. I built it as the perfect digital surveillance web, and my wife Elise just walked right into it. "Who's she with?" I asked Marcus, my front desk manager, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. "Corporate lawyer type. Expensive suit, wedding ring. They registered under the name Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Real original." I almost laughed. After 14 years of marriage, Elise thought she was being clever. What she didn't know was that every keycard swipe, every Wi-Fi connection, every room service order was logged and analyzed by systems I'd personally designed. The Blue Heron wasn't just a hotel, it was my hunting ground for tracking money laundering networks, and now it was about to serve a very different purpose. "Put them in the penthouse suite," I said, "the one with the panoramic city view." "Sir, that's our most expensive." "On the house, Marcus. Make sure they feel special." I hung up and stared at my computer screen, where multiple windows displayed the hotel's internal systems. With a few keystrokes, I activated the surveillance matrix I'd built into every room. The penthouse suite wasn't just luxurious, it was wired with synchronized cameras that could capture audio clear enough for spectral analysis. My marriage was ending in real time, and I had front row seats. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd used these same techniques to catch corporate criminals who thought they were smarter than the system. Now I was about to catch my own wife in an affair that, based on the credit card patterns I'd been tracking for months, had been going on for over a year. I pulled up Elise's cloud accounts. Yes, I had access to everything. That's what happens when you're married to someone who builds security systems for a living and you never bother to change your passwords. The digital breadcrumbs told a story of deleted messages, mysterious calendar blocks marked as client meetings, and credit card charges at restaurants I'd never been to. But this was different. This was proof. I opened a new window and began recording everything. Every camera angle, every audio feed, every digital footprint. If Elise wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong opponent. My phone buzzed again. A text from Elise. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." Love you. The words felt like a slap across the face. I typed back, "No problem. I'll probably work late too. Enjoy your meeting." Then I settled in to watch my marriage die. The surveillance footage was better than I'd hoped. High-definition cameras captured everything as Elise and her mystery man entered the penthouse suite at 3:15 p.m. I finally got a clear look at him. Tall, silver-haired, probably mid-40s, expensive watch, confident swagger, the kind of guy who'd never faced real consequences in his life. I ran his credit card through my system. Graham Dalton, senior partner at Dalton, Pearson Associates. Married, 2 kids, lives in Cape Elizabeth. The kind of corporate lawyer who made his money helping rich people stay rich while everyone else got screwed. Perfect. Elise always did have a type. I watched them settle into the suite, popping open a bottle of champagne that cost more than most people made in a week. The audio pickups caught every word as they toasted their freedom and laughed about how clueless I was. "Luke's so buried in his little computer world, he wouldn't notice if I brought a marching band home," Elise said, her voice dripping with contempt. Graham chuckled. "Well, that makes this easier. My investigator says we can have everything documented for the divorce within a month. Domestic neglect, emotional abandonment, we'll clean him out." "What about the business? And the house?" "Leave that to me. I've got 3 judges who owe me favors. Your husband won't know what hit him." I leaned back in my chair, processing what I'd just heard. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning to destroy me. Financially, legally, completely. Graham was already building a case to take everything I'd worked for, using his connections in the legal system to guarantee the outcome. The rage that hit me was cold and calculating. I'd spent years taking down criminals who thought they were untouchable. Now I was looking at 2 more. I opened my secure files and began building a dossier. Graham Dalton wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was planning to manipulate the legal system to steal from me. That made this a criminal conspiracy, and I had every second of it recorded. But I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of their plan. I accessed the hotel's Wi-Fi logs and tracked their devices. Graham's phone was connected to the guest network, and his security was laughably weak. Within minutes, I was reading his text messages, emails, and calendar entries. What I found made my blood run cold. Graham had been planning this for months. He'd researched my finances, my business, even my personal history. He knew about my federal background and was using it against me, claiming in legal documents that my paranoid tendencies and surveillance obsession made me an unfit husband. He'd already drafted divorce papers, already filed preliminary motions, already scheduled hearings with judges he'd bought and paid for through campaign contributions and legal favors. They were going to destroy me, and they thought it would be easy. I saved everything to encrypted drives and began cross-referencing Graham's other cases. If he was corrupt enough to fix my divorce, he'd done it before. And if he'd done it before, there would be evidence. 3 hours later, I had what I needed. Graham Dalton wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a criminal who'd been bribing judges and manipulating cases for years. His law firm was a front for money laundering operations that stretched across 3 states. And I had proof of all of it. My phone rang. It was Detective Sarah Naylor from the Portland PD, an old contact from my federal days. "Luke, I need a favor. We're investigating some irregularities in the court system. Financial crimes, possible judicial corruption. Word is, you might have some insights." I smiled for the first time all day. "Sarah, you have no idea how much I'd love to help with that." The next morning, I sat in my home office reviewing the intelligence I'd gathered while Elise slept peacefully upstairs, probably dreaming about her new life with Graham. She had no idea that her lover was about to become the center of a federal investigation. I'd spent the night building what we used to call a target package in my federal days, a comprehensive profile of Graham Dalton's criminal activities. The man was dirty in ways that went far beyond simple adultery. My analysis of his law firm's financial records revealed a sophisticated money laundering operation. Shell companies in Delaware, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and a network of judges who ruled in favor of his clients in exchange for campaign contributions and consulting fees. But the most damaging evidence came from his deleted communications. Graham was sloppy with digital security, probably because he'd never faced anyone with my skill set. His permanently deleted files were child's play to recover. In those files, I found communications with 3 different judges discussing specific case outcomes. I found invoices for services that were never performed. I found bank transfers that coincided perfectly with favorable rulings in high-stakes cases. Graham Dalton wasn't just stealing my wife, he was stealing from the entire justice system. I heard Elise stirring upstairs and quickly minimized my screens. She came down a few minutes later, already dressed for work, her phone buzzing with what I now knew were messages from Graham. "Morning, honey," she said without looking at me, pouring coffee into a travel mug. "I'll be late again tonight. Big presentation for the Morrison account." The Morrison account had been completed 3 months ago. I'd helped her practice the presentation. "No problem," I said, watching her text rapidly while she thought I wasn't looking. "I've got a busy day, too. Might have to travel for that hotel security contract." She looked up briefly. "Which hotel?" "The Blue Heron downtown. Routine security audit." If she recognized the name, she didn't show it. She kissed me on the cheek, a gesture that felt like a betrayal now that I knew where those lips had been, and headed for the door. "Love you," she called back. "Love you too," I replied, and meant it. That was the hell of it. Despite everything, despite the lies and the betrayal and the conspiracy to destroy me, part of me still loved the woman I'd married 14 years ago. The woman who used to laugh at my jokes and fall asleep in my arms and dream about the future we were building together. But that woman was gone. In her place was a stranger who was planning to take everything from me and leave me with nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus at the hotel. "They're back. Same suite. Should I comp them again?" "Absolutely," I typed back. "Give them the full VIP treatment." I spent the morning reviewing more surveillance footage from their previous visits. The audio quality was excellent, and what I heard made me realize just how deep this conspiracy went. Graham wasn't just planning to take my assets in the divorce, he was planning to have me investigated for crimes I'd never committed. He'd already spoken to contacts in the FBI about my suspicious federal background and my obsession with surveillance technology. "The guy's a classic paranoid personality," Graham said to Elise during one recorded conversation. "My contact in the bureau says they'd love an excuse to take another look at his federal service record. All I need is one complaint about stalking or harassment, and they'll tear his life apart." "What if he fights back?" Elise asked. "With what? By the time we're done with him, he'll be facing federal charges. No one's going to believe a word he says." They were planning to frame me, not just steal from me, not just divorce me, but actually send me to prison for crimes I'd never committed. That's when I stopped feeling guilty about what I was planning to do to them. I opened a secure connection and uploaded everything to Detective Naylor. Then I began phase 2 of my operation. If Graham Dalton wanted to play dirty, I was about to show him what dirty really looked like. The penthouse suite at the Blue Heron had been designed for exactly this kind of operation, though I'd never imagined I'd be using it against my own wife. Every surface contained hidden cameras. Every corner had audio pickups calibrated for voice recognition. The entire room was a surveillance web that could capture evidence admissible in any court in the country. Graham and Elise had no idea they were performing for an audience of one. I watched them from my office as they settled in for what had become their regular Tuesday afternoon routine: champagne, room service, and the kind of intimate conversation that revealed just how much they despised me. "My investigator finished the financial analysis," Graham said, loosening his tie. "Your husband's worth more than we thought. The automation business is pulling in serious money, plus he's got investments we didn't know about." "How much?" Elise asked, kicking off her shoes. "Conservative estimate. We're looking at $2.3 million in total assets. The house alone is worth $800,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. $2.3 million? My accountant had told me I was worth maybe half that. Graham's investigator was either incredibly thorough or had access to information that shouldn't have been available to a private citizen. "And you're sure we can get it all?" Elise asked. "Baby, I've been doing this for 20 years. The key is controlling the narrative. Luke's going to be painted as an obsessive, controlling husband who used his technical skills to stalk and harass you. By the time I'm done, the judge will be begging to give you everything just to protect you from the dangerous man you married." "What about his federal background? Won't that make him look credible?" Graham laughed. "That's the beauty of it. His federal background makes him look dangerous. My contact at the bureau says there were always questions about some of his methods. Push the right buttons, and they'll be happy to take another look at his service record." I was recording every word, but I was also learning something crucial about my enemy. Graham Dalton had contacts throughout the law enforcement community. Judges, FBI agents, probably prosecutors too. He'd built a network of corruption that stretched far beyond simple divorce fraud. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about bringing down a criminal organization that had been manipulating the justice system for years. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Naylor. "Got your package. Holy shit, Luke. This is bigger than we thought. Can you get more?" I typed back, "Working on it. They're meeting again now. Be careful. If this guy has the connections you're documenting, he's dangerous." She was right. Graham wasn't just a cheating lawyer. He was a criminal with powerful friends. If he suspected I was onto him, he could destroy me before I had a chance to expose him. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd chosen to operate out of my hotel, on my turf, using systems I'd designed. Every move he made was being recorded and analyzed by technology he couldn't even imagine. I watched as he pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's me," he said. "We need to accelerate the timeline. I want the paperwork filed by Friday." He was talking to someone I couldn't see, but the audio pickups caught both sides of the conversation. "That's pretty fast, Graham. Are you sure about the evidence?" "I'm sure. The wife is cooperating fully, and I've got documentation of erratic behavior going back months. Plus, my contact at the bureau is ready to move on the federal angle." "What federal angle?" "The husband's ex-federal cyber crimes. There were always questions about his methods. Some missing evidence, some unauthorized surveillance. Nothing that stuck at the time, but enough to build a case if we push the right buttons." My blood went cold. Graham was talking about fabricating evidence of federal crimes. Not just lying in divorce court, but actually framing me for violations of federal law. "And you're sure your contact will play along? For $50,000 in campaign contributions? He'll do whatever we need." I had him. Graham Dalton had just confessed to bribing a federal agent to fabricate evidence against me. That wasn't just divorce fraud. That was a federal crime that could put him away for decades. But I needed to know who his contact was. I needed names, dates, specifics that would allow law enforcement to roll up his entire network. I activated the hotel's enhanced surveillance protocols and began recording everything at maximum resolution. If Graham was going to destroy himself with his own words, I wanted to capture every syllable. What happened next exceeded my wildest expectations. Graham's phone conversation continued, and with each word, he dug himself deeper into a hole that would eventually become his grave. "The bureau contact is Special Agent Robert Chen," Graham said, apparently feeling secure enough in the penthouse suite to use real names. "He's been helpful with other situations. Ambitious guy, always looking for ways to advance his career. A high-profile case involving federal surveillance overreach would be perfect for him. I frantically typed notes while recording everything. Special Agent Robert Chen, FBI. I'd never heard the name, but that didn't mean anything. The Bureau was a big organization, and I'd been out of federal service for 8 years. What about the local angles? The voice on the phone asked. Judge Patricia Morrison will handle the divorce proceedings. She owes me for the Blackstone case last year. Judge David Reeves will handle any criminal referrals. Both of them understand the importance of cooperation. Judge Morrison. Judge Reeves. I was getting names, and each one was another nail in Graham's coffin. And the timeline? Divorce papers filed Friday. Criminal complaint filed the following Monday. By Wednesday, Luke Harper will be in federal custody, and his wife will have emergency custody of all marital assets. Sounds like you've thought of everything. I always do. That's why I get paid the big money. Graham hung up and turned to Elise, who had been listening to the entire conversation while filing her nails. You heard all that, baby. By next week, you'll be a very wealthy single woman. And Luke will be in prison? If everything goes according to plan, yes. The federal charges will be serious enough to keep him locked up for years. Even if he eventually beats them, the legal costs will bankrupt him, and the publicity will destroy any chance he has of rebuilding his life. Elise smiled. I almost feel sorry for him. He really has no idea what's coming. That's what makes this so easy. Luke thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, but he's been outplayed by professionals. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. I sat back in my chair, processing what I'd just heard. They weren't just planning to divorce me. They were planning to frame me for federal crimes and send me to prison. Graham had corrupted judges and FBI agents, and he was about to use all of them to destroy my life. But he'd made one crucial error. He'd told me exactly who was involved and exactly when they planned to move. That gave me a window of opportunity to strike first. I immediately called Detective Naylor. Sarah, I need an emergency meeting. What I've got is bigger than we discussed. How big? Federal judges, FBI agents, a criminal conspiracy that goes back years. And they're planning to move against me within the week. Jesus, Luke, where are you? My office. Can you come here? On my way. And Luke, don't talk to anyone else about this. If what you're saying is true, we don't know who we can trust. She was right. Graham's network of corruption extended throughout the law enforcement community. One wrong move, one conversation with the wrong person, and I could end up in federal custody before I had a chance to expose the truth. But I had advantages Graham didn't know about. 8 years of federal service had given me contacts of my own, people who owed me favors, and people who cared more about justice than politics. I started making calls. Tom, it's Luke Harper. Remember that favor you owe me from the Meridian case? I need to cash it in. Tom Rodriguez was a federal prosecutor in Boston, someone I'd worked with on several major cases during my bureau days. If anyone could help me navigate the corruption in the main legal system, it was him. Luke, good to hear from you. What do you need? I've got evidence of judicial corruption, FBI misconduct, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes. But the corruption includes people in the local system, so I need someone from outside Maine to handle it. How solid is your evidence? Audio recordings, financial records, documented communications, everything you'd need for RICO charges. Send me what you've got. If it's as good as you say, I can have a federal task force in Portland by tomorrow. I encrypted everything and sent it to Tom's secure server. Then I sat back and waited for Detective Naylor to arrive. The next few hours would determine whether I spent the rest of my life in prison or whether Graham Dalton and his criminal network finally faced justice. Either way, the game was about to change dramatically. Detective Naylor arrived at my office 40 minutes later, and the look on her face told me she understood the gravity of what we were dealing with. I've been reviewing the files you sent, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Luke, this is the kind of corruption case that ends careers. Are you absolutely certain about your evidence? Every recording is time-stamped and verified. Every financial transaction is documented. Every communication is authenticated. Graham Dalton has been running a criminal enterprise out of his law firm for years, and now he's planning to use it to destroy me. And you're sure about the federal angles? FBI agent Chen, the judges? I've got Graham on tape naming names and describing specific acts of corruption. Tom Rodriguez is already assembling a federal task force to investigate. Sarah nodded grimly. Good. Because if we move on this locally and Graham's corruption extends to the Portland PD, we could both end up dead. The thought had occurred to me. Graham had contacts throughout the law enforcement community. If he suspected I was onto him, he might decide that eliminating me was easier than fighting a corruption investigation. What's our next move? I asked. We need more evidence. Specifically, we need to catch them in the act of bribing officials or fabricating evidence. What you've got is good, but a defense attorney could argue it's just talk. She was right. Audio recordings of criminal conspiracies were valuable, but actually documenting the crimes in progress would make the case bulletproof. They're planning to file divorce papers on Friday and criminal charges on Monday, I said. That gives us 3 days to catch them in the act. Can you monitor their communications? I've been monitoring everything. Phone calls, text messages, emails, in-person meetings. Graham's digital security is a joke. Then we wait and watch. Let them think they're in control while we document every crime they commit. My phone buzzed with a text message from Elise. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. I showed the message to Sarah. She's meeting Graham again. Same time, same place. Perfect. Let's see what they're planning next. We spent the afternoon reviewing the surveillance protocols I'd established at the hotel. Sarah was impressed by the technical sophistication of the operation, though she was careful not to ask too many questions about the legal basis for the surveillance. Technically, they're guests at your hotel, she said, and they've been using the facilities to plan criminal activities. A good prosecutor could argue that you had reasonable grounds for enhanced security measures. At 3:00 p.m., Marcus called to confirm that Graham and Elise had checked into the penthouse suite again. Sarah and I settled in to monitor their conversation. What we heard exceeded our expectations. The FBI contact confirmed everything, Graham was saying. Agent Chen will file the federal complaint on Monday morning. By noon, Luke will be in custody. What are the charges? Elise asked. Unauthorized surveillance, violation of federal privacy laws, possible espionage charges related to his federal service. Chen says they've been looking for an excuse to investigate Luke's activities for years. And you're sure it will stick? Baby, it doesn't matter if it sticks. The arrest alone will destroy his credibility. Even if he eventually beats the charges, he'll be bankrupt and unemployable. No one hires ex-federal agents who've been investigated for corruption. Sarah and I exchanged glances. Graham was describing a classic frame-up, using fabricated federal charges to destroy someone's life, even if the charges were eventually dismissed. What about Judge Morrison? Elise asked. Is she definitely going to rule in our favor? Patricia owes me big time. The Blackstone case would have destroyed her career if I hadn't made it go away. She'll give you everything you ask for and probably throw in punitive damages for good measure. How much are we talking about? Total? Probably $3 million by the time we factor in punitive awards and legal fees. You'll be set for life. I was recording everything, but I was also calculating the scope of the conspiracy. Graham was planning to steal $3 million from me using fabricated federal charges and corrupted judges. This wasn't just adultery. It was organized crime. There's one more thing, Graham said. My investigator thinks Luke might be suspicious. He's been asking questions about our security protocols at the hotel. My blood went cold. If Graham suspected I was on to him, he might accelerate his timeline or take more aggressive action. What kind of questions? Elise asked. Technical stuff about surveillance systems and data retention policies. Could be nothing, but we should be careful. Should we meet somewhere else? No, this place is perfect. Private, secure, and Luke doesn't have any connection to it. We'll stick to the plan. Sarah and I looked at each other. Graham had no idea that he was planning his crimes in a location I owned and controlled. His arrogance was about to be his downfall. We've got enough, Sarah whispered. Tom's task force can move whenever we give the word. Not yet, I replied. I want to catch them actually bribing the officials. Audio recordings of plans are good, but video of money changing hands is better. When? Tomorrow. Graham mentioned meeting with Judge Morrison tomorrow afternoon. If we can catch that exchange on camera, we'll have everything we need. Sarah nodded. Then we wait one more day. But Luke, after tomorrow, we move fast. These people are dangerous, and they're planning to destroy your life. We can't give them any more time to execute their plan. She was right. Graham and Elise were planning to frame me for federal crimes and steal everything I'd worked for. In 3 days, I would either be in federal custody or they would be. There was no middle ground. Thursday morning brought news that changed everything. Tom Rodriguez called at 7:00 a.m. with an update that made my blood run cold. Luke, we ran background checks on the people you identified. FBI agent Robert Chen doesn't exist? What do you mean he doesn't exist? I mean there's no FBI agent by that name in any database we can access. Either Graham is using a code name, or he's planning to have someone impersonate a federal agent. The implications hit me immediately. If Graham was planning to use a fake FBI agent to file fabricated charges against me, then his criminal conspiracy was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. What about the judges? I asked. Judge Patricia Morrison is real, and she's definitely corrupt. We've been investigating her for 6 months based on irregularities in her rulings. Judge David Reeves is clean as far as we know, which means Graham is probably planning to lie about having him in his pocket. So Graham's network is a mix of real corruption and complete fabrication? Looks that way, which makes him even more dangerous because he's desperate enough to impersonate federal agents and lie about judicial connections. People that desperate don't hesitate to commit violence when their plans fall apart. Tom was right. Graham wasn't just corrupt, he was reckless and possibly delusional. That made him unpredictable and extremely dangerous. What's the timeline for federal intervention? I asked. We can move today if necessary. I've got a task force standing by in Boston, and they can be in Portland within 2 hours. Let me get through today's surveillance first. Graham is supposed to meet with Judge Morrison this afternoon, and I want to document that exchange. If we can catch him bribing a sitting judge, it'll make the case bulletproof. Agreed. But Luke, if you feel threatened at any point, call immediately. Don't try to handle this alone. I spent the morning reviewing Graham's communications and preparing for what might be the final phase of the surveillance operation. His text messages revealed that he was increasingly paranoid about security, but he was still planning to proceed with his original timeline. At 1 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Your wife just arrived. She's alone this time. That was unusual. Graham and Elise always met together. If she was at the hotel alone, it meant something had changed. I activated the surveillance systems and watched as Elise entered the penthouse suite. She was carrying a laptop bag and appeared nervous, constantly checking her phone. 15 minutes later, Graham arrived, but he wasn't alone. The man with him was tall, thin, and wearing a cheap suit that screamed government employee. He carried a badge wallet and had the kind of rigid posture that suggested law enforcement training. This must be our fake FBI agent, I muttered, adjusting the camera angles to get a clear view of both men. What happened next was better than anything I could have scripted. Agent Chen, thanks for coming, Graham said as they settled into the suite's sitting area. The fake agent nodded. Let's make this quick. I don't like meeting in person. Understood. Do you have the complaint forms? Right here. The fake agent pulled out a manila folder. Federal charges for unauthorized surveillance, violation of privacy laws, and possible espionage. Just like we discussed. And you're sure this will hold up? Long enough to destroy his life. Even if the charges are eventually dismissed, the arrest and investigation will bankrupt him and destroy his credibility. I was recording everything in high definition, capturing both audio and video of Graham conspiring with someone impersonating a federal agent to file fabricated charges against me. What about payment? The fake agent asked. $50,000, just like we agreed. Graham pulled out an envelope. Cash, untraceable. And the timeline? File the complaint Monday morning. I want Luke in custody before he knows what hit him. The fake agent pocketed the envelope and stood up. Consider it done. By Monday afternoon, Luke Harper will be in federal custody facing charges that could put him away for 20 years. After the fake agent left, Graham and Elise celebrated with champagne and discussed their plans for spending my money. $3 million, Elise said dreamily. We could buy a house in Florida, travel the world, do whatever we want. Baby, this is just the beginning. Once I've perfected this system, we can target other wealthy husbands, doctors, business owners, anyone with assets worth stealing. They were planning to make this their business model. Graham wasn't just trying to steal from me. He was developing a system for destroying wealthy men and stealing their assets through fabricated legal charges. I had everything I needed. Video evidence of bribery, conspiracy to commit federal crimes, impersonation of a federal agent, and plans to repeat these crimes against other victims. I called Tom Rodriguez. It's time, I said. I've got everything on video. Graham just paid $50,000 to someone impersonating an FBI agent to file fabricated federal charges against me. Jesus Christ, Luke. Send me everything immediately. I'm mobilizing the task force now. How long before they can be here? 2 hours. Can you stay safe that long? I'll be fine. But Tom, you need to know. They're planning to make this their business model. I'm not their only target. Then we'll make sure they never get the chance to hurt anyone else. I encrypted the video files and transmitted everything to Tom's secure server. Then I called Detective Naylor. Sarah, it's over. I've got everything we need. Federal task force will be here in 2 hours. Thank God. Where are you? My office. Where are Graham and Elise? Still at the hotel, as far as I know. Why? Because when the federal agents arrive, I want to make sure they're both in custody. These people are too dangerous to let slip away. Agreed. I'll coordinate with the task force to make sure we grab them both simultaneously. I sat back in my chair and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. After days of watching my wife and her lover plan my destruction, I was finally about to turn the tables on them. But the game wasn't over yet. Graham and Elise were still free, still dangerous, and still planning to destroy my life. Until they were in federal custody, I couldn't afford to let my guard down. The next 2 hours would determine everything. At 4:30 p.m., my carefully constructed world nearly collapsed when my phone rang with a call I wasn't expecting. Mr. Harper, this is Jennifer Walsh from Dalton, Pierce & Associates. I'm Mr. Dalton's paralegal, and I need to speak with you urgently. My first instinct was that this was a trap. Graham had somehow discovered my surveillance operation and was using his employee to gather intelligence about my activities. I'm sorry, but I don't think we have anything to discuss, I said carefully. Mr. Harper, please don't hang up. I know what Mr. Dalton is planning to do to you, and I want to help stop it. That got my attention. What do you mean? I've been working for Graham Dalton for 3 years, and I've seen him destroy innocent people before. What he's planning to do to you is criminal, and I have evidence that could stop him. What kind of evidence? Financial records, communications, documentation of bribes paid to judges and court officials. I've been keeping copies of everything because I knew someday I'd need protection from him. This was either the break I'd been hoping for or the most sophisticated trap Graham had ever set. Either way, I had to find out which. Where do you want to meet? I asked. Somewhere public. The coffee shop on Exchange Street. I'll be there in 30 minutes. How will I recognize you? I'll be wearing a red scarf and carrying a brown leather briefcase. Mr. Harper, please be careful. If Mr. Dalton suspects I'm talking to you, he'll destroy us both. I called Detective Naylor immediately. Sarah, I just got a call from Graham's paralegal. She says she has evidence and wants to meet. Could be a trap. That's what I thought. Can you provide backup? Absolutely. I'll have plainclothes officers in the coffee shop before you arrive. If this goes sideways, we'll be ready. And if it's legitimate? Then we just got the break we needed to make this case bulletproof. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and spotted Detective Naylor's backup officers immediately. They were trying to look casual, but after 8 years in federal service, I could identify law enforcement personnel from across a crowded room. Jennifer Walsh arrived exactly on time. She was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested someone under enormous stress. Mr. Harper? She asked, approaching my table cautiously. That's me. Please, sit down. She sat across from me, clutching the brown leather briefcase like her life depended on it. Before we start, she said, I need you to know that I'm taking an enormous risk by talking to you. Graham Dalton has destroyed people for less than this. What do you mean, destroyed people? I mean, he's done this before. The fake federal charges, the corrupted judges, the systematic theft of assets. You're not his first victim, Mr. Harper. You're just the latest. My blood went cold. How many others? At least 6 that I know of. Wealthy men going through divorces, business owners with valuable assets, anyone Graham thought he could steal from without consequences. And you have documentation? Everything. Financial records showing bribes paid to Judge Morrison. Communications between Graham and the man pretending to be FBI agent Chen. Bank records showing how the stolen assets were laundered through offshore accounts. She opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. This is just a sample. I have boxes of documents hidden in a storage unit. Enough evidence to put Graham away for the rest of his life, and probably bring down Judge Morrison too. I reviewed the documents she'd brought. They were devastating. Financial records showing systematic corruption, communications proving criminal conspiracy, and evidence of multiple victims who'd been destroyed by Graham's schemes. Why are you coming forward now? I asked. Because I can't watch him destroy another innocent person, and because I think this time might be different. Different how? Graham doesn't know about your federal background, does he? He thinks you're just another wealthy businessman he can steamroll with fake charges and corrupted judges. But you're not. You're someone who knows how to fight back. She was right. Graham had underestimated me from the beginning, assuming I was just another victim who would be too shocked and overwhelmed to mount an effective defense. What do you want in return for this evidence? I asked. Immunity from prosecution and witness protection. When this comes out, Graham will try to kill me. I'm not being dramatic. I've seen what he does to people who threaten him. I can't promise immunity, but I can put you in touch with federal prosecutors who can make that deal. That's all I ask. I called Tom Rodriguez immediately. Tom, I need you to speak with someone. Graham's paralegal wants to turn state's evidence in exchange for immunity and protection. Put her on. I handed Jennifer my phone, and she spent the next 20 minutes providing Tom with an overview of the evidence she possessed. When she handed the phone back to me, Tom sounded excited. Luke, this woman just handed us a RICO case that could bring down an entire criminal organization. I'm sending a federal marshal to bring her into protective custody immediately. What about Graham and Elise? We moved tonight. With Jennifer's evidence combined with your surveillance recordings, we have enough to charge them with conspiracy, bribery, fraud, and impersonation of federal agents. They'll both be in federal custody by morning. I looked at Jennifer, who was visibly relieved. It's over, I told her. By tomorrow, Graham Dalton will be in federal prison where he belongs. Thank you, Mr. Harper. You have no idea how long I've been waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to him. Thank you for having the courage to come forward. Without your evidence, he might have gotten away with it. As we waited for the federal marshals to arrive, I reflected on how quickly everything had changed. 24 hours ago, I'd been facing federal charges and financial ruin. Now, my wife and her lover were about to be arrested for federal crimes. Justice was finally within reach. The federal task force moved with military precision. At exactly 6 p.m., while Graham and Elise were still celebrating their anticipated victory in the penthouse suite, federal agents surrounded the Blue Heron Hotel. I watched from my office as the operation unfolded on multiple screens. Tom Rodriguez had given me permission to monitor the arrests, partly as a courtesy for my cooperation and partly because my surveillance system provided the best real-time intelligence about the target's location and activities. Federal agents, open the door. The audio pickup in the penthouse suite captured every word as agents announced themselves outside the room where Graham and Elise were sharing what they thought would be their last secret meeting. What the hell? Graham's voice was sharp with panic. This is FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest. I watched as Graham frantically tried to gather documents while Elise stood frozen in shock. Neither of them understood what was happening or how their perfect plan had collapsed so completely. The door opened and 6 federal agents entered with weapons drawn. Graham Dalton, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit federal crimes, bribery of public officials, and impersonation of federal agents. This is ridiculous, Graham shouted as agents handcuffed him. I'm a lawyer. You can't just... Elise Harper, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory to federal crimes. Elise finally found her voice. I want a lawyer. I don't know what you think we've done, but, ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs, their faces showing the kind of shock and disbelief that comes when someone realizes their entire world has collapsed in a matter of minutes. My phone rang. It was Tom Rodriguez. Luke, we've got them both in custody. Clean arrests, no complications. They'll be processed tonight and arraigned tomorrow morning. What about the fake FBI agent? We picked him up an hour ago. Turns out he's a private investigator named Michael Stevens who's been impersonating federal agents for years. He was carrying the $50,000 Graham paid him, which makes the bribery charge bulletproof. And Judge Morrison? Federal marshals are executing a search warrant on her home and office as we speak. With Jennifer's evidence and your recordings, she'll be in custody by morning. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. After days of watching criminals plan my destruction, justice was finally being served. What happens next? I asked. Arraignment tomorrow, then a long legal process. But Luke, with the evidence we have, these people are going to prison for a very long time. Graham's looking at 20 to 30 years. Elise probably 10 to 15 as an accessory. And my marriage? That's not a legal question, but I'd say your marriage ended the moment your wife decided to frame you for federal crimes. The divorce will be straightforward now. No judge in the country would award assets to someone convicted of conspiracy to defraud their spouse. He was right. My marriage was over, but at least I would survive it financially and legally intact. Tom, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. Luke, you handed us the biggest corruption case we've seen in years. We should be thanking you. After hanging up, I sat alone in my office and tried to process everything that had happened. In less than a week, I'd discovered my wife's affair, uncovered a criminal conspiracy, and brought down a corrupt network that had been operating for years. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. 14 years of marriage had ended with my wife being arrested for trying to destroy my life. The woman I'd loved and trusted had been planning to send me to prison for crimes I'd never committed. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Naylor. Saw the news? Are you okay? I typed back, I'm fine. Justice served. Want to grab a drink? You shouldn't be alone tonight. She was probably right, but I needed time to think. Time to figure out how to rebuild my life after everything I'd believed about it had turned out to be a lie. Thanks, but I think I need some time alone. Rain check? Of course. Call if you need anything. I turned off my phone and walked to the window. Outside, Portland was settling into evening, completely unaware that one of the biggest corruption cases in Maine history had just been broken open. Tomorrow, the news would break. Graham Dalton, prominent lawyer and pillar of the community, arrested for federal crimes. Judge Patricia Morrison, respected jurist, charged with taking bribes. Elise Harper, creative director and seemingly devoted wife, accused of conspiring to frame her husband. The scandal would dominate local news for months. But tonight, it was just me and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. The blue hour was over. The reckoning had begun. The arraignment hearing the next morning was everything I'd hoped it would be. Federal prosecutor Tom Rodriguez presented evidence so overwhelming that even Graham's expensive defense attorney looked defeated before the proceedings began. I sat in the gallery, watching as my wife and her lover were formally charged with crimes that would likely send them to federal prison for decades. Elise kept looking back at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation that I found deeply satisfying. Your Honor, Tom addressed the federal magistrate, the government has evidence of a sophisticated criminal conspiracy involving bribery of public officials, impersonation of federal agents, and systematic fraud targeting multiple victims. Graham's attorney stood up. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence and requests reasonable bail pending trial. Mr. Rodriguez, what is the government's position on bail? Your Honor, Mr. Dalton has demonstrated a willingness to corrupt law enforcement officials and has extensive financial resources hidden in offshore accounts. He represents both a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. The government requests he be held without bail. The magistrate reviewed the evidence summary Tom had provided. Mr. Dalton, the evidence against you appears substantial, and the charges are serious. Bail is denied. You'll remain in federal custody pending trial. Graham's face went white. He'd probably expected his connections and reputation to protect him, even after his arrest. The reality that he would spend the next several months in a federal detention facility was clearly shocking. Mrs. Harper, the magistrate continued, you're charged as an accessory to conspiracy. Given your cooperation with planning these crimes, bail is set at $500,000. Elise's attorney whispered something to her, and her face crumpled. She didn't have $500,000 for bail, which meant she would also remain in custody. As they were led away in shackles, Elise turned to look at me one final time. I met her gaze without emotion. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by a criminal who'd tried to destroy my life for money. After the hearing, Tom and I met for coffee to discuss the ongoing investigation. How strong is the case? I asked. Bulletproof. Between your surveillance recordings, Jennifer's documentary evidence, and the physical evidence we recovered during the arrests, we have everything we need for conviction. What about the other victims? We're reaching out to them now. Jennifer identified 6 previous cases where Graham used similar tactics. Most of those men had their lives destroyed and never understood what really happened to them. Will they get justice? Some of them, yes. We're working with civil attorneys to help them recover assets that were stolen through fraudulent legal proceedings. It won't undo the damage, but it's something. And Judge Morrison? Arrested this morning. Her home safe contained over $200,000 in cash that she couldn't explain. She'll probably plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. I felt a grim satisfaction knowing that the corrupt network that had targeted me was being systematically dismantled. Tom, there's something else. Graham mentioned having contacts throughout law enforcement. Are you investigating those connections? Absolutely. This case has opened up investigative leads that could take years to fully pursue. Graham's criminal network was much larger than we initially realized. My phone buzzed with a call from Detective Naylor. Luke, I wanted to give you a heads up. The local news is running the story tonight. You might want to prepare for media attention. She was right. By evening, every news outlet in Maine was covering the story of the prominent lawyer and his accomplices who'd been arrested for running a criminal conspiracy targeting wealthy husbands. The coverage was everything I could have hoped for. Graham was portrayed as a predator who'd used his legal expertise to systematically steal from innocent victims. Elise was described as a willing accomplice who'd betrayed her marriage vows for money. My role in exposing the conspiracy was presented sympathetically. I was the vigilant husband who'd uncovered evidence of criminal activity and courageously provided it to law enforcement. But the media attention also meant that my private life was now public. Neighbors, colleagues, and acquaintances all knew that my wife had cheated on me and tried to frame me for federal crimes. The humiliation was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. My phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, friends, and people I barely knew who wanted to express their support or satisfy their curiosity. I stopped answering after the first dozen calls. By evening, I was exhausted and emotionally drained. The justice I'd sought had been achieved, but it came at the cost of my privacy, my marriage, and my faith in the people I'd trusted most. I poured myself a drink and sat in my home office, surrounded by the surveillance equipment that had made this victory possible. Outside, news vans were parked on my street, waiting for any opportunity to interview the man who'd brought down one of Maine's most prominent lawyers. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. divorce proceedings, asset recovery, rebuilding my reputation and my life. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel the satisfaction of knowing that the people who'd tried to destroy me were now facing the consequences of their crimes. Justice had been served. The blue hour was over. 3 months later, I stood in the federal courthouse watching Graham Dalton receive his sentence. 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Morrison had received 12 years after pleading guilty to accepting bribes. The fake FBI agent, Michael Stevens, got 15 years for impersonating a federal officer and conspiracy. Elise's sentencing had been 2 weeks earlier. 12 years for conspiracy and accessory to federal crimes. Her attorney had argued for leniency based on her cooperation with prosecutors, but the judge was unimpressed by her claim that she'd been manipulated by Graham. "Mrs. Harper," the judge had said during sentencing, "you actively participated in planning crimes that could have sent an innocent man to prison for decades. Your betrayal of your marriage vows pales in comparison to your betrayal of the justice system itself." I'd watched from the gallery as she was led away in handcuffs, tears streaming down her face. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a larger part felt only satisfaction that justice had been served. The civil lawsuits had been even more rewarding. Graham's law firm had been forced to pay restitution to all of his victims, totaling over $15 million. The firm had declared bankruptcy, but insurance policies and seized assets had covered most of the settlements. My own financial situation had improved dramatically. The divorce had been finalized within 6 weeks, with Elise receiving nothing due to her criminal conviction. I'd kept the house, the business, and all of our joint assets. More importantly, I'd received a settlement from the law firm's insurance company for the emotional distress and reputational damage caused by the conspiracy against me. The settlement amount was confidential, but it was enough to ensure I'd never have to worry about money again. Jennifer Walsh had been true to her word. Her testimony had been crucial in securing convictions against all the major players in Graham's criminal network. In exchange, she'd received immunity from prosecution and had entered the Federal Witness Protection Program. Detective Naylor had been promoted to sergeant, partly based on her role in exposing the corruption case. Tom Rodriguez had received a commendation from the Justice Department for his handling of the investigation, but the most satisfying outcome had been the impact on other victims. 3 of the men Graham had previously destroyed had been able to recover significant assets through civil lawsuits. 2 of them had their criminal records expunged after it was proven that the charges against them had been fabricated. I'd also received dozens of letters from people who'd heard about the case and wanted to share their own experiences with legal corruption. Some of those cases were now being investigated by federal authorities. The Blue Heron Hotel had become something of a local landmark. The penthouse suite where Graham and Elise had planned their crimes was now known as the Justice Suite, and the hotel's occupancy rate had increased significantly due to the publicity. I'd considered selling the hotel, but decided to keep it as a reminder of how quickly life can change and how important it is to be prepared for betrayal. My personal life had been slower to recover. The media attention had eventually died down, but the emotional scars from Elise's betrayal were taking longer to heal. I'd started seeing a therapist to help process the trauma of discovering that the person I'd trusted most had been planning to destroy my life. The sessions were helpful, but I still found it difficult to trust people or form new relationships. Pete, the bartender who'd first told me about Elise's affair, had become one of my closest friends. He'd been there throughout the entire ordeal, providing support and perspective when I needed it most. "You did the right thing," he told me over drinks one evening. "A lot of men would have just accepted the betrayal and tried to move on. You fought back and made sure they faced consequences." "Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it," I replied. "The justice feels good, but the personal cost was enormous." "Luke, they were planning to send you to prison for crimes you didn't commit. If you hadn't fought back, you'd be in federal custody right now while they spent your money." He was right, of course. The alternative to fighting back would have been accepting destruction at the hands of people who viewed me as nothing more than a source of money to be stolen. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Tom Rodriguez. "Graham's appeal was denied. His conviction is final." I smiled and showed the message to Pete. "That's it then," he said. "It's really over." "Yeah," I replied. "It's really over." As I walked home that evening, I reflected on everything that had happened since that phone call at 2:47 p.m. 3 months earlier. My marriage was over, but I'd survived. My trust in people had been shattered, but I was learning to rebuild it carefully. Most importantly, I'd proven that criminals like Graham Dalton weren't untouchable. With enough evidence and the right allies, even the most sophisticated criminal conspiracy could be brought down. The blue hour had ended, but the dawn was beginning. 1 year later, I stood in the empty penthouse suite of the Blue Heron Hotel, preparing for my final act in this drama. The federal investigators had released the room back to me months ago, and I'd left it exactly as it was on the day Graham and Elise were arrested. Tomorrow, I would be leaving Portland forever. The government contract I'd accepted would take me to a classified location where I'd be helping federal agencies improve their cybersecurity protocols. It was a return to the kind of work I'd done before my marriage, before I'd tried to build a normal suburban life with someone who'd turned out to be a stranger. The house had sold within a week of being listed. The automation business had been transferred to my former partner, who'd been running day-to-day operations anyway. The hotel had been sold to a national chain that planned to renovate it completely. Everything that connected me to my old life was being systematically erased. I'd received a letter from Elise the week before. She was serving her sentence at a federal prison in West Virginia and would be eligible for parole in 8 years. The letter was full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness, but I'd thrown it away without finishing it. There was nothing she could say that would change what she'd done or undo the damage she'd caused. Graham had also tried to contact me through his attorney, offering information about other criminal cases in exchange for my support for a reduced sentence. I'd declined to meet with him. He'd made his choices, and now he was facing the consequences. The fake FBI agent, Michael Stevens, had died in prison 3 months earlier. Apparently, he'd made the mistake of trying to run a con on the wrong inmate. Justice had been served more quickly and more finally than any court could have managed. Judge Morrison was serving her sentence at a minimum security facility and would likely be released in 6 years. She'd been disbarred and would never practice law again, but she'd probably find some way to rebuild her life after prison. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Part of me wanted her to suffer more for her role in the conspiracy, but a larger part of me was simply tired of thinking about revenge. The other victims of Graham's schemes had all received settlements and were rebuilding their lives. 2 of them had reached out to thank me for exposing the conspiracy that had destroyed their marriages and reputations. Their gratitude was more meaningful than any official recognition I'd received. Detective Naylor had stopped by earlier in the week to say goodbye. She'd been promoted again and was now heading a new task force focused on investigating corruption in the legal system. "You started something important," she told me. "The Graham Dalton case has opened up investigations in 6 other states. We're finding corruption networks that have been operating for decades." "Good," I'd replied. "Maybe other people won't have to go through what I went through." "Luke, I need to ask you something. Do you regret any of it? The investigation, the surveillance, the way it all played out?" I'd thought about her question for a long time before answering. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the woman I married turned out to be someone I never really knew, but I don't regret fighting back. If I hadn't, they would have destroyed me and moved on to destroy other people. And now? Now I'm moving on too. Different kind of life, different priorities. Maybe someday I'll be ready to trust someone again, but not yet." She'd nodded understanding. "Take care of yourself, Luke. You deserve happiness after everything you've been through." As I stood in the empty hotel suite, I thought about happiness and whether it was something I'd ever find again. The betrayal had changed me in fundamental ways. I was more suspicious, more guarded, less willing to believe in the goodness of people, but I was also stronger. I'd faced the worst kind of betrayal and survived. I'd taken on a criminal conspiracy and won. I'd proven to myself that I could handle whatever life threw at me. My phone buzzed with a final message from Tom Rodriguez. "Safe travels, Luke. Thanks for everything." I typed back, "Thanks for believing in the evidence and acting on it. Justice served." I took one last look around the suite where my marriage had ended and my new life had begun. Then I walked out, leaving the past behind. The elevator descended silently toward the lobby, where a car was waiting to take me to the airport. In 2 hours, I'd be on a plane to my new assignment, my new life, my new identity. The blue hour was over. The screen was going dark. But somewhere in the darkness, justice had been served, and that was enough.